Good afternoon, everyone, and happy fall. So excited to get a chance to do another cafecito this week with two incredible Latinx leaders here in North Carolina as we kick off our fall season. We can officially say that now, fall season. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Ricky Hurtado here with LatinxEd, and we are having another cafecito where we highlight important topics and leaders related to education equity around the state of North Carolina. And today we have the incredible opportunity to talk to two more of our fellows that we've been highlighting in this series, Selina Lopez and Christian Walter. And I'm really excited for you to get to know them and their respective work at El Vínculo Hispano, or the Hispanic Liaison in Chatham County, and at High Point Newcomer School in Guilford County. Today, the topic is all about school administration and education equity, and really thinking about the opportunities within our schools, but also community partnerships and how that ecosystem really works. And these two are perfectly suited to have those conversations as they're doing this work right now in real time on the ground in our communities. So excited to dig into some questions there regarding their work. But first, like always, want to make sure that you both have a chance to introduce yourselves. You both have rich stories and backgrounds, immigrant roots here in North Carolina. So I wanted to give you all a chance to share with our audience your name, where you're from, your immigrant roots, and what role you're currently playing when it comes to advancing education equity. And we always like to throw in a fun fact as well, if you want, around sort of what you're up to in your community. And so I'll kick it off to Christian first, if you want to get us started.
Well, thank you so much, Ricky. My name is Christian Walter. I am the principal of the new newcomer school in High Point, North Carolina. That's a Guilford County Schools, and I just thrilled to be here with you today. And I just wanted to start share with you a little bit about my journey to the United States. I was born and raised in Argentina, and back in 2000, it was when I recall I was in Argentina. I was reading a newspaper one Sunday, and I ran into this advertisement of a company from Chapel Hill that was looking for teachers to come and work here in the United States. So I decided to go ahead and apply, and I made it through a very rigorous selection process, and I was hired, and I moved here, and it was a life-changing experience. Quite frankly, I went through all the different stages of cultural shock. First, I went through the honeymoon stage. I was amazed at what I saw. But then reality sank in, and I started feeling homesick because I was missing my family. And then, well, I gradually got used to my new setting as I fell in love with the United States. I started off at Hatch Road Elementary in Wake County as an EL teacher, and being a newcomer to the United States, I always held myself to high expectations because I wanted to be worthy of being hired. For example, I had to wear multiple hats at the school. I was the only bilingual person there. So that entailed that I had to serve as an interpreter, as a translator, at times even like a social worker, making home visits. And that's where I found my niche in the advocacy work. But the day came in when, in spite of all that I had invested in my life here in the United States, that I was faced with a huge challenge when I found out that I no longer had a sponsor. So I remember that summer that I sent out like over 300 resumes pleading for a teaching position. And fortunately, an interview for a teaching position here in Guilford County turned into a job offer and then into a green card application. And that's how I gained permanent status. And I started climbing the professional ladder. I became an EL coach for the district, for the teachers here, and then an assistant principal. Just to refer to the second part of the question regarding educational equity, most of my career has been always focused in helping those who have less, and those are our most marginalized and vulnerable students. I address equity through the lens of student achievement, student discipline, conversations with my staff, and also reflection. For student achievement, I am convinced that race should not be regarded as an indicator for student achievement. And my task as a principal is to manage the quality of control of the instruction that is taking place in the different classrooms of my school. So that's why when I do observations, when I do walkthroughs, my focus is on the instruction that is taking place, making sure that that task is aligned to the state standards. And I also embedded within instruction, there is this idea of data-driven instruction, which is our safety net, because that's the tracking system that we use so that students don't fall through the cracks. I can relay for you, for example, I was able to install a culture of data-driven instruction with my teachers for the past 2 years, which contributed to significant proficiency growth in EOG tests. And it was amazing. It was amazing to see some of these kids that were passing the EOG for the first time. And then I also said discipline, student discipline with restorative practice approaches, because those are the ones that prevent students from being, actually punitive approaches prevent students from being inside the classroom. So we need to relay more on those, and that's what I try to do to the best of my ability. Conversations with the staff, just to have conversations with the staff about racial inequities and challenging the language of others when there are like remarks that are full of intolerant, biased, or racist content. And finally, I said reflection, because as a school administrator, we're so busy juggling so many responsibilities. I think that there's always room for improvement. So it's very important to sit down and relax and reflect onto what one does, because just thinking about this idea, well, how could have this been improved? I think that that's always something that leans towards that idea of improvement that is always possible.
Wow. One of the things I love about these cafecitos is even though we all know each other already, you always learn more as you're in part of conversation. And I think what I love about your story, Christian, is that you know firsthand what so many of the students that we work with across North Carolina go through, because you have that same lived experience of going through what can be a maddening immigration system, right? In terms of sponsorships and visas, and the stress of things expiring or trying to figure out what a pathway forward is. And I know you know that very well. You can tell just a snippet of what you probably went through as you're trying to figure out a way to stay in a place that I imagine you now consider home, right?
Yes, absolutely. But yes, I mean, that's all the learning that took place. It was a significant learning curve for me. But while we made it through, it took some time, a couple of years, so actually like 15 years until I became a citizen, but it was worth it.
I love your cup half full approach. A couple of years, only 15. So,
Yeah.
well, we're certainly grateful that you are now a North Carolinian and one of our education leaders that is doing really incredible work. And I'm excited to dive more into what you all are doing at the newcomer school. But I want to give Selina here a chance to introduce herself as well, because she has a story of her own as well.
Yes, thank you, Ricky. Well, first, I just want to say I'm super honored to be here with all of those joining us and with these two incredible people, Ricky and Christian. As Ricky said, my name is Selina Lopez, and well, my story begins in Mexico. I was born in a small pueblo called Jaltianguis in the state of Guerrero, but I immigrated to the United States with my mom when I was about 5 years old to another small rural town called Vaughn, which is actually in Warren County in northeastern North Carolina. Not many people know where it is, so I always have to give more instruction of where to look in this in the state, but it's near the Virginia border, near Lake Gaston, which always makes me laugh because of all the cities that my mom could have chosen. I don't know how we ended up in Warren County of all places. But looking back now, I'm really grateful for the experiences I went through growing up in Warren County, even though it was a super hard one for me because I went through a huge kind of identity crisis. A lot of the times growing up, I would be the only Latinx student in my classes, and my family was one of the very few Latinx families in the area. So, add that with not knowing how to speak English, when I first started school, and just being, incredibly confused all the time growing up. Honestly, I felt kind of like an outcast. I didn't like being Mexican. I didn't like speaking Spanish. I was pretty ashamed of who I was. And then, to kind of top that off, I was actually undocumented, which I didn't know what that meant at the time. All I knew was that I couldn't tell anyone that, my story or my parents' stories, because we didn't really know who to trust. And so very much silence throughout my childhood, which, kind of perpetuated this whole notion of me not accepting my story and my identity. But I will say that I was very much one of the lucky ones, because I was able to obtain residency in the 9th grade. That really opened the door to me applying to the North Carolina School of Science and Math, which I always describe as the best and worst years of my life, because I navigated through so much imposter syndrome. And it was actually really the first time I realized the educational disparities that exist in our schools in regards to resources and opportunities that certain schools have or are given versus others. It was really the first time I could see the clear differences between my home high school in Warren County, a predominantly Black school in a rural county, versus NCSS. And so, through my time there, I was grateful for the opportunities, because it really, exposed me to things that I had never seen before. And, if it wasn't for science and math, I don't think I would have applied to college, because I didn't know what college was, to be honest. My parents didn't know what college was. And so I pretty much kind of like copycat all my other friends of like, oh yeah, this is how I'm applying, or this is where I'm applying. And I got accepted to UNC, where I graduated in 2017. With majors in psychology and Hispanic literature and cultures, which, I became the first in my family to graduate from college. And, I was glad that I went to UNC, because, it was kind of where I got introduced to Siler City. Also, thanks to LatinxEd, actually back in 2014. And, it's where I've been working at for 4 years now as youth director of Orgullo Latinx Pride, which is the youth leadership program housed under the Hispanic Liaison, or El Vínculo Hispano, which is a nonprofit organization here in Chatham, but that service Lee, Randolph, and Alamance counties. And really, in this role, I use a lot of my personal experiences to have conversations about identity and cultural heritage and history with Latinx high school youth here growing up in Chatham, that is actually a rural county as well. Trying my best to have them feel empowered and not silenced about their stories and about their parents' stories, because I know how that feels. I know a lot of us know how that feels. And so I strongly believe that, a positive cultural affirmation and acceptance is step number one for youth to feel empowered and loved, because those are part of, who we are as people, and important and crucial to the success of, trying to create a safe and brave space for them to share those experiences, to then feel like they can create change, that they do have power, and that, they can actually, make our community better and stronger with the power of their voices and their stories. And so, that's kind of what I do here in the youth program, trying to fight for more representation.
I love that. I love that. I mean, I've loved your story since the first day that we met, Selina. And I think what's powerful for me is similar to what we do at LatinxEd. You've really seen the challenges that you faced growing up, and now you've dedicated your work, your life in many ways to making sure that this next generation isn't facing those same barriers. And I think that's what for me is so inspirational about leaders like y'all, that you recognize these challenges through your own lived experience, and then you're making sure that in your environments, you're making sure that we can identify and work through a better path forward to make sure that we're operating in a more equitable way. And so I want to actually dive into my first question for both of you here, based off of your incredible stories. You both have stories about, at times maybe not feeling seen, not feeling heard. And now you're in a school setting, in a community-based organization, working in education with youth, with educators, with staff, in a number of different ways. In your role now, how do you work to make sure that now those same students and staff feel seen and heard throughout the work that you're doing? And I'll kick it over to Christian to start us off here.
Sure. So I truly believe that it is very important to ensure that students and staff feel that their voices are being heard to promote a positive school culture and climate, so that students are motivated and learning takes place. And then on the other hand, teachers are also excited and they go back to their classrooms and they do their best. I think that the foundational step here has to do with building relationships, as with many other things that we're going to probably talk about today. So it's very crucial to build relationships with staff and with students. And I'm going to steal Stephen Covey's words. He sometimes talks about making deposits on the trust accounts. So I think that it's very important as a school administrator for me to make some deposits on those trust accounts, just to get the trust going there. And then when it comes to students, for example, cultural responsive teaching is a good strategy. And this has to do with having teachers get to know what their students are basically coming from. And it entails, for example, viewing the students' cultural backgrounds and linguistic repertoires as assets. So it is like an asset-based mentality. And I think that if we use cultural responsive teaching, that's going to enhance the trust between teachers and their students, and even myself with my students and staff. Additionally, with students, the use of restorative practice and social emotional learning, the circles, those are like really good safe spaces for students to be able to problem solve situations and issues. And even when you give students like controlled choices, like you give them 3 or 4 choices to choose from, that's something that can be utilized in the classroom, or even if you're planning a school-wide event, an assembly or something like that, and you want to get, you want your students to get their voices feel heard. Those are viable options, in addition to providing them the floor with a space so that they can voice their opinions and concerns, such as, for example, student council. That's another possibility, so that students can feel their voices are being heard. Now, on the other hand, it is also important to have your staff get the same feeling as well. And some administrators look into the teacher working conditions, which gives you an indicator of the most pressing needs of your staff at your school. That's something that a lot of administrators, and if you're an administrator and watching us today, I'm sure that you know what you're talking about, what I'm talking about. I think it is also crucial to be visible and approachable on a daily basis. One of the first things that I do when I go to my school is in the morning to go to my classroom, greet the teachers, greet the students, because if you're approachable, then students and teachers are going to be able to voice whatever concern or need they may have. And just bear in mind that sometimes teachers want their issues or concerns taken care of on a timely manner, which may represent at times a challenge because we have to juggle so many responsibilities as a school administrator. Finally, I wanted to share something that I do with my staff at the moment. And we started with this when we got into the pandemic, and it is the question of the day. And it is something that I really enjoy doing with my staff because I push it out. It's a question that I push out to their inboxes, and we use Canvas. And the question may revolve around an educational topic, or it can be the reflection to a quote, or it can be, I don't know, something along the lines of how they feel on that particular day. And it's just something that helps me as an administrator to build community and to build climate. And just to give you an example, the other day, for example, the question of the day was about how to balance student talk and teacher talk in the classroom. So everybody was just like coming back with ideas. And you can see like all the responses of different teammates, and you can even reply to someone that you're really interested in, or just like, there is like a dialogue, like a conversation taking place. And on the next day, the question of the day was about intention. So what is your intention for today? And I shared my intention for that day, that was to drink more water and to look for the positive out of the negative situations. So that's another creative way that I utilize to build trust with my staff so that they feel that their voices are heard.
Wow. I love all those practices. I'm gonna need a coaching session with you on how to implement some of this stuff, because a lot of it I'm familiar with, but some of it I think is sounds fascinating in terms of how to really make sure that students and staff feel like they have agency and voice in the process. A quick follow-up for you here is, do you see a difference? Like, can you tell the difference in the environment when students especially feel like they have agency and voice in decision making and sort of have a bit more control of their environment?
Yes, absolutely. Because when you give them like a choice, or when they feel that their voices are being heard, that's going to translate into ownership. They're going to take ownership of whatever. I don't know if it is an event, whatever you just like trying to implement. So I think that if you want to invest, or if you want to ensure that your students take ownership, a good starting point has to do to ensure that they feel that their voices are being heard.
Wow, that's fascinating. We could talk about that all day, but I want to make sure that we hear your perspective, Selina, because I know, especially this topic of ownership, I know it's something that you think about a lot as well.
Yes, no, absolutely. And definitely, to echo some of the things that Christian was saying, right? Like building relationship and trust is pretty much essential. I think like for the youth program in OLP, our first weeks together is always centered around getting to know each other, our stories, our struggles, our dreams, and just getting to learn to trust each other. One of the first things I also always mention in the beginning is that this program is yours, right? Telling the youth that this isn't a Vínculos program. This is a program for you, and that you can take agency of it. And so, I definitely do my best to remind them of that all the time, because we really do always try to center the youth voice, whether that means them choosing the topics we talk about, them, giving ideas on activities or field trips, or, opportunities in the community that we can all participate in. Really, all of those things have been youth inspired and even youth led. And so, that's really one of my goals, is to always make sure that they feel heard, and feel like the program is theirs. And, a part of that and how that happens is that I actually do have a cohort of youth who are elected by their peers to represent them, to voice, where they can, voice to each other what they want to be seen in the program, which is really incredible. And then at the end of the year, we have something called like a leadership retreat, where youth participate, and we literally kind of go through all the events we have done throughout the year, and they have an honest and constructive feedback session about all the programming, what went well, what they didn't like, what could have gone better. And so they actually helped me create the curriculum and activities for the following year as well. And so, that's kind of how I ensure that I always keep their ideas and their voice at the forefront, because a lot of it, is, like I said, youth inspired and created and led. And I like to always say, I'm just the facilitator. And, on the other hand, my other hat that I wear, kind of like, as in a district level, is that, as youth director, sometimes I'm asked to speak on behalf of youth, which I don't usually like doing. And so when I do have opportunities like that, I usually bring my youth along. I usually say, hey, I actually have youth that I work with who can actually speak on this topic. And so really bringing them and making space for them to have a chance to use their voice and share directly with these, people in power, or, have a seat at the table, because I think a lot of times youth don't get to experience that a lot. And I think them having that opportunity really gives them that sense of agency, that sense of power and empowerment, that, the adults around them or the community that they're living in really do care about them. So, that's kind of like my goals and how I really do try to center the youth voice.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. We could spend the whole hour just talking on this topic, and I because I personally find it fascinating, but I also think because it's, I think, an area of growth for a lot of us, because I think in theory we all believe in this notion of giving students greater voice and helping them be part of the decision making, but in practice I think for a lot of us it's actually really hard, because we have grant applications to fill out, right? And objectives that we we set out to achieve in schools, right? You have a curriculum that you're supposed to follow and certain sort of milestones that you have to be achieving over the course of a semester as well. And so I wonder how you all think about that around the balance between student choice and voice, but also understanding that some of the things that you're trying to achieve in any given educational setting are also sort of stretch goals for people, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And so how do you sort of help guide youth to make sure that we're getting to the college access part of the conversation, or the math portion of the conversation, or whatever it might look like, right? I'm just curious how you think about that around the balance of student voice and also sort of reaching the objectives of an overall program and having some structure in place. And so either one of you can answer that. This is mainly, I'm going off script here, but I'm just like really curious about how y'all think about that.
Yeah, I think for me, I think transparency, like I'm pretty honest with my youth, and my youth know that, funding is a big part of like why the program exists. And I think, they take a sense of responsibility too of making the program a success, right? So, I pretty much give them a template to follow. I don't also just be like, oh, okay, what do we want to talk about, but I kind of explain like, these are kind of like, the goals that we want to talk about, and, kind of using that, but also letting them be creative and getting inspired and adding their little, sass and pizzazz to it, to make it engaging, because I think like, youth bring other youth in. And I think really that's what has made our program really successful, because they know kind of, these certain markers we need to hit in terms of like, for our funders or donors. But at the same time, it's like, they're great out of the box thinkers, and they bring, a special twist to it that I think has really benefited all of us.
That's interesting. Did you have anything to add, Christian? Or
No, I think that Selena just nailed it with that.
No, that's great. No, thanks y'all. Well, great. Well, I want to learn more about what else is taking place in your district. So, you don't operate in silos, and there's a whole ecosystem of initiatives and programs that are working with the communities that you work with every day. So can y'all talk a little bit about the initiatives in place at your districts that are working towards education equity, in your opinion, are seeing some success?
Do you have the entire evening? I can stay here. Because that's like a really hot topic in my district, I think. And I always, when I'm on social media, I always say that Guilford County Schools has set the bar for educational equity pretty much in the United States. And I'm just gonna try to summarize a little bit of this. But there has been so much work done here in this district, and this began way before the pandemic started. And for example, I can reference to the school's district's strategic plan, which went into effect in 2018. And if you have access to GCS, Guilford County Schools website, you can go and check it out. But this document is full of bold language that promotes this idea of educational equity and social justice. For example, phrases, I have it here, and there is a phrase that is very powerful. It says, we will acknowledge and dismantle systems, processes, and mindsets that perpetuate race, poverty, disability, and English language status as predictors of achievement. So the goals in the district strategic plan represent an opportunity for students' life outcomes to be improved. On the other hand, there's also a partnership. Our district has a partnership with New Leaders. New Leaders is a nonprofit out of New York with one of the most rigorous principal preparation programs.
Oh, wow.
And this partnership, you may want to check it out. This partnership allows us to all school administrators to receive training, professional development through New Leaders, with a laser focus on instructional excellence and educational equity. This has developed somehow a type of common language across the district when it comes to equity practices and standard aligned instruction. And then as soon as we hit the pandemic, the district during the first summer was able to put together a team of master teachers to develop lesson plans. And I'm just talking about very experienced teachers who they all got together, they developed lesson plans so that by the time teachers after the summer got back into the classrooms, they were able to spend time learning about digital tools while those lesson plans were being utilized with students remotely. On the other hand, while GCS was one of the first districts, I think in the States, in the United States, that had all their students back into their classrooms for face-to-face instruction gradually with all safety protocols in place, which contributed to a less significant learning loss for our brown and Black students. So I think that that is huge as well. I also wanted to point out about the Gala program, which I think is unique in the state. And this is a program, it's a cohort for male assistant principals of African American, Hispanic descent, just to prepare them for the first principalship. And this basically is done in an attempt to close the racial gap when it comes to leadership positions in the district. There's also research there that shows that when students see that their leaders, their principals, their assistant principals look like them, that may be a contributing factor to raising student achievement. And finally, Ricky, I just wanted to share, actually highlight the work of our superintendent, Dr. Sharon Contreras. I think that our district is very lucky to have her because she's a real trooper, she's a pioneer, and she has put educational equity in the forefront of her administration. I just wanted to share with Selina and with you, Ricky, and the audience that we have today. There is an article that Dr. Contreras wrote like a couple of months ago that was featured, I think it was featured in the School Superintendent Association website, and it's called Equity Warriors. So this is a mass read. If we have someone in the audience that is interested in the work of educational equity and social justice, this is a must read because here Dr. Contreras and Dr. Carr basically gives us like a detailed account of some of the initiatives that are taking place here in Guilford County. But I just wanted to share with you the last paragraph if I can. And it says, Guilford County develops its education leaders to become equity warriors for a reason. Making the structural changes needed to create more equitable schools for all children requires intestinal fortitude and strong political will. Knowing what to do is not nearly as hard as getting enough to buy into the change to make it happen. With children's learning and life outcomes depending on us, however, we can do no less. Very powerful article that I suggest that I just recommend it to everyone in the audience because this is a good artifact to good practices for social justice and educational equity.
That's great. I ran out of paper, so thank you for that, Christian. I cannot longer take any more notes on all the things you were saying, but I want to highlight here for folks who want to know how the magic happens on the Zooms, right? We have our wonderful communication specialist, Katerina, here. And I'm actually going to request, could you quickly Google Equity Warriors, that article, and drop the link in the Facebook chat so our listeners can make sure they read that as their weekend reading here, because Dr. Contreras is an incredible leader, as Christian was highlighting. And I think that article should probably be welcome homework for all of us as we think about what our journeys towards educational equity look like.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing all that. That's really rich. Selina, same question for you. Different context, but not too far away from Guilford. How are you hearing these conversations around equity pop up, and what sort of initiatives are manifesting in your community?
Yeah, no, I'm going to actually read that article that Christian was mentioning too over the weekend, because that's super interesting. I think here in the district of Chatham, I think Chatham has made progress toward education equity. It's definitely one of the forefront passions that they have. I think we definitely still have a lot of work to do. And, I'm pretty new to the community, even though I've been here 4 years. So as a community partner, I kind of see it as a partner for the schools. One of the great things of Chatham County Schools is that they have this cool team that they called E3 team, that stands for Equity Excellence for Everyone, that is made of different people at the table, like educators, parents, administrators, and community partners, which is where me and my executive director, Ilana, were invited a couple of years ago. I think it was the year right before COVID hit. We had only been to a couple of meetings until, COVID hit and kind of everything shifted to, rapid response to help our students during the pandemic. But the cool thing about this team is that, we focus on advocating for social justice and also eliminating barriers for, the diverse populations we have here in Chatham. One of the cool things that happened this year actually was that a new specific position for the district was created. The position is Executive Director of Excellence and Opportunity, but really the focus of this position is on equity work, which is really amazing, because then it's like a paid position that the district is really intentionally focusing on trying to move more towards education equity, which I think is super amazing, that they have funding to back this up. The other thing I'll mention too is that we have other organizations doing amazing work, such as CORE, that stands for Chatham Organizing for Racial Equity. And really they do a lot of trainings in the community, but also with Chatham County Schools to do racial equity trainings with teachers and educators to make sure that, educators are, going through these trainings so that they can better serve all of their students in their classrooms, which I think is super essential to the work. And then the final organization that I'll mention is Chatham Education Foundation, which I just joined their board, but I think they're doing amazing work because they work really closely with Chatham County Schools, but bring parent voices into the mix. And so, I really want to get a lot more Latinx parents and voices involved into this, because I think 33% of our student population here in Chatham are Latinx students. And so the parents' voices are super essential to really make sure that we're doing equity work properly in the county. But I do think that, our administrators, our new superintendent, Dr. Anthony Jackson, definitely comes from a good place. He's having listening tours happening starting next Monday throughout, the month of October. And so, I'm also getting ready to recruit parents to be like, hey, let's go to this, so because I really do think that, the superintendent should hear from our parent voices in our community. But I think the heart is there in Chatham. So I'm really excited to see what else they can make happen in these coming months.
No, leadership matters, and it is something that I repeat over and over and over in any context, because you begin to see what it means to have great superintendents like Jackson and Contreras and Guilford and Chatham, really thinking about what equity means for their students in the community and what it looks like to center parent voices and to really be bold and thinking outside of the box and being able to introduce new initiatives as well, and not fear failing in many ways, right? Because this work is hard, right? There's been a lot of progress, but it's not easy. And I love the line that Christian shared from that article, right, about having the fortitude, but also having strong political will to sort of see this move forward. And so, a lot to unpack there. And we are dropping the links to many of these initiatives that were cited in the articles on the Facebook chat. So feel free to check those out further if you're curious to learn more about those initiatives. I have another question related to this conversation, and you started alluding to it, Selina, so I'm gonna let you go ahead and continue running with this question. But you're not in the school system, and you're playing an outside role through El Vínculo Hispano, or the Hispanic liaison. From your perspective, what is the advantage of having these sorts of community-based partnerships with schools?
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I think it's a win-win situation for everybody, but most importantly, our students, our youth, right? I think, it definitely takes a village to really help our youth achieve and fully live out their dreams. And so I really do think that, schools partnering with community partners is just like magical. We were really lucky that this year, the assistant superintendent, Dr. Moran, so shout out to her, she really proposed an official MOU to have, our youth program be part of the school system now, because we had been doing the work in the community for the past 4 years, not necessarily, using any school resources, not really, with the support of the schools. But I think like she realized like, wow, they're doing amazing work. And so now making it official, I think it's just a win-win for everybody, because now we don't have to worry about like, where to have space to have our youth physically meet to do, the magical stuff we do in our program. But, now it's like we can use school space. And I think that really, also the students see that, the power of that, because they're like, wow, okay, yay, like our program is in the school. That means that our school administrations care about us. They see that we care about this program, and, that we really want to be part of it. But I think like, more schools should partner with a lot of nonprofits or community partners. And I think I'm biased there as a community partner myself. But I think like, I think it really serves students in different areas, whether that's extracurricularly, social, emotional, academic, culturally. I just really think it's essential, because it really does take a community effort to provide opportunities and resources and help eliminate those barriers that exist for our students that don't necessarily have the opportunities to participate in certain things. And so I think it also allows the youth to feel loved, to see that more adults outside of school, that, that they see that they care about them and care about their potential and their dreams. And I think it gives them energy and confidence to pursue those dreams, because they see that they literally have a whole village. They have their community like rooting for them and cheering them on. So I think it's just like, yes, a win-win.
Yeah, win-win. Well, what about from the school side, Christian? What do you see as the role of community partnerships or the advantages? Have you seen that in Guilford County?
Yes, I could not agree more with Selina. I mean, I concur with her. Just to give you an example, as a first-year principal that I am, one of the first things that I had to do when I was appointed as principal last June was to type an introductory letter and send it to all community members. So community partnerships, I think, are a critical component of effective schools, because they may translate into support for students and staff, and then that will most likely turn into higher student achievement. And then on the other hand, as Selina said, this win-win situation, because if our communities have good schools, then that's going to attract investments, that's going to attract companies to come and put their businesses here in our communities. So that's why it is a win-win situation. But let me give you an example. The other day, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, I had to attend the monthly High Point School Partnership meeting. And that's a chapter of the Guilford Educational Alliance, which is an organization from this district. And this was a meeting that I had the opportunity to talk about my school, which is a brand new school, to business leaders from High Point and some political leaders as well. So I was able to introduce myself, talk a little bit about myself, and then basically share about my school, how it is being built, how things are taking place. And then by the end, I was able to make a call to all attendees, asking them for support, because we need support for our PTO, the PTA, and the school-based leadership team. You're not going to imagine, but when that meeting was over, I had a long line of people that were lined up, just waiting to talk to me, just to give me their business cards, and just to set up an appointment with me, just to see how they could support the school that is going to be brand new and unique here in High Point. So yes, I mean, the advantages of community partnerships are endless, as you can see.
Yeah, no, and that's no surprise that folks are are lining up to talk to you, Christian. So we're not
I
surprised. You may
wanted
be
to know
surprised.
about the school.
Yeah, I'm excited to attend that ribbon cutting once it is done.
Hopefully, you're gonna find out when that happens. And just to clarify, my school is not open yet. It's gonna we're housed at the Greensboro Newcomer School in Greensboro, the Doris Henderson Newcomer School in Greensboro, until our building goes renovations and all that, and then hopefully it's gonna be open.
No, that's exciting. Progress in Guilford County. That's really great to hear. That's really great to hear. I wanted to pause here just to make sure for folks still watching on Facebook Live or anywhere else, if you have questions for either of our audience members today, I mean our panelists today, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll try to incorporate them into this conversation as we wrap up here in the next few minutes. But I had just a few more questions for y'all. This has been a really fascinating conversation as we think about just really the relationship between the community and schools and how we navigate these conversations around equity within that environment. I'm curious, part of the conversations on our end and something we think about a lot as an organization is really about engaging families and parents in this conversation. And so we've talked a lot about the students and staff, and we've talked a lot about community partnerships. And we've alluded to centering parent voices, but I wonder what that's looked like for y'all in COVID. I know for LatinxEd, it's been a challenge, given some of the, I guess, promising practices that we know we lift up by centering community and culture and really making sure that our families felt welcomed in this process. But now it feels like a lot of organizations, a lot of schools, a lot of colleges are really struggling on keeping parents engaged. And so you don't have to have an answer, but I wonder how you're thinking about that right now as we continue to navigate a prolonged pandemic. And so, Selina, I'll let you kick it off here.
Yeah, no, that's a super, great question. And yeah, as a community partner who has seen just a lot of, tragedy that has happened to a lot of our community members through the pandemic, it's so hard for parents to, stay engaged in terms of like, it's not that they don't want to, right? It's just that they go through so much, and they have been through so much, whether it's like worrying about, keeping food on the table. A lot of parents lost jobs. Some parents actually passed away. And so, the youth themselves have had to step up and also provide, that financial stability to their families. But I think it's like there's so much need, and as at least as an organization, we recognize that, right? And so one of the things that we've been able to do, and something that I'm, so grateful to work for an organization that's really flexible, and, we were pretty quick to respond to the needs of our communities, is that, creating, pathways to these resources of, oh, you need food, let's connect you to Cora, a nonprofit organization that gives out food. Or, oh, hey, you didn't qualify for the stimulus check that the government was giving because of your status. We partnered with 6 other nonprofits to make sure that, we were able to provide some financial security to these families going through a tough time. So I think the pandemic definitely, rose or highlighted, because these issues and needs have always been there, but I think like because of the pandemic and the seriousness of things, it just kind of like brought it to the forefront. And so at least right now, I think slowly things are not returning to normal, but returning to kind of like a new normal. And I think parents are fired up because they've realized, like, through remote learning, their students suffered a lot academically in terms of, falling behind. They didn't know how to support their students during that time. And I think that fueled a lot of them in wanting to, get engaged and get involved into the conversation, which I think it will be really helpful when, this Dr. Jackson does his roundtable talks, because, I hope parents are feeling empowered to share those things, because I think it's important to highlight.
No, that's so true. Just meeting parents where they are, right? And being incredibly flexible in this moment as we think about what it looks like to support them. Christian, I wonder if you have anything to add to this question.
Yes, basically just to remind you guys that in my case, my school is temporarily housed at Doris Henderson Newcomers in Greensboro. So basically, I can talk about the services that are rendered by Doris Henderson Newcomers. We are very fortunate to have a very strong support team there, which works really cohesively with our families. And I'm referencing to interpreters and community liaisons for multiple languages: Spanish, Swahili, Vietnamese, French, and Arabic. They go above and beyond, making home visits, trying to find students, which has been one of the latest trends. This inability at times to be able to find students because they don't report to the school, and the schools are accountable for those students. And they are actually working really hard to get those resources to our families as soon as they register their students. We're talking about a newcomer school, and these are kids that just newly arrived into the country. So they usually need a lot of help, a lot of support, a lot of assistance, and they make it happen because they are really very well organized. Now, when there is a high demand for interpreters, the district has contracted with Language Line, which is a 1-800 interpretation service. And it's very user-friendly because teachers can call that hotline, and you enter the school district's account, and then you select the language for interpretation. And then the magic happens because you're routed to an operator who speaks that language. So that's another system in place. And then also our school, Doris Henderson Newcomers, has offers wraparound services for their students. They have a partnership with UNCG Greensboro, and students are able to get free counseling services on campus during the school day for those students that are in need of that, and that is completely free of charge.
Wow, that's incredible. I keep learning about new things from UNCG every day, and they do an amazing job in the communities. That's really great to hear. That's really great to hear. I have one final question for y'all, and we had a few questions from the audience. I'm just going to wrap it up into this final question for y'all. We had questions around acknowledging the difficulties of doing equity work and how this often feels like a story of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or maybe sometimes 1 step forward, 2 steps back sort of thing, as we continue to think about how we best serve the needs of communities of color and marginalized, historically marginalized students in our community, especially low income and working class families in North Carolina. And so, I mean, my question for y'all is pretty simple. What keeps you motivated and fired up to keep doing this work? And I'll let you go first, Selina.
That's an easy one. It's the youth for me. You know, the youth that I get to work with here in Chatham are just so inspirational. You know, I see myself in them a lot. And, you know, just their stories, their power, the resiliency, just like everything about them just is what really keeps me going. They give me hope that, you know, that they'll be the leaders that will really, you know, actually do what needs to happen, and that, you know, that the seeds that we're planting here in the program, that they really bring to fruition once they, you know, are out there changing the world. So I think for me, that's an easy one. It's the youth and their families here in Chatham that really just, you know, make it worth it for me, because they are the heart of this county, and they are definitely going to change the world, because I've seen them change mine, and I've seen them change a lot of lives here in Chatham too, with you know, with the work that they do in the program. So that one's easy.
I love that. I'm stealing that quote. I know they're going to change the world because they've changed mine. That's beautiful. And that's so true, right? And doing this work, you see just the potential of what we can be, and the vision of a beloved community in our youth, right? Christian, what about you?
That's an easy one for me as well. Newcomers School is a very unique school, a very special place to work at. And every morning when I get up, I basically feel that I'm making history in these kids' lives, because that's the place where they're getting their first taste of the education in America. And so it's a landmark place. And then students come to us with a lot of motivation to learn. They spent 2 semesters, so we need to install a really significant sense of instructional urgency so that we can prepare them for a successful transition into their home schools, and we work really hard. And then I just wanted to share that sometimes I must admit, sometimes I even identify with them, especially when I see at times when they have a little bit of free time, they're looking up pictures online of their hometowns or map of their hometowns. That's sometimes an indication that they may be homesick, missing their families. And I empathize with them. And there's this strong connection, because that sometimes happens to me, that even though I've been here for 21 years, I sometimes go back to Google to look at pictures of my hometown or the map or stuff like that. And then on the other hand, we all know that the United States is the land of opportunities. Some of our kids that come to the newcomer school have the ability to dream because they've always wanted to be here, but some other kids don't have that ability because they're coming here running away from places where there was a lot of turmoil, or they are running away from traumatic situations. So I really enjoy for my kids to be like a dream builder, just trying to make sure that those dreams come true by showing them all the options that they're going to have once they get an education here. And I really enjoy that type of work.
Wow. I must be tired. You guys are going to make me emotional. Yeah, it's why we do the work, right? And I think lifting up those hopes and dreams and being able to, as Elaine, our executive director, often says, right? Like, this work oftentimes is just a love letter to our former selves. And it does feel like that way at times. And so, pro tip for everyone watching: end your week talking to a youth director and a principal of a school if you want to be inspired and motivated to keep going, because y'all are definitely inspirational in my eyes. And I know a lot of folks who are wanting to become future educators and really think about what it means to work in the field of education and pursue equity right now. And so want to thank you both so much for your time this afternoon. This was a really great conversation. For folks that want to continue learning more about Selina and Christian and their respective organizations and schools, we're dropping all the social handles on Facebook. Feel free to reach out to them personally if you have questions. Check out their organizations to make sure you know what they're up to and their continued progress in their communities. Well, that's all we have for today. Again, really appreciate the conversation.